The stag has been making this racket all night. The neighbors are used to it. They know autumn is the rutting season. His mating call echoes from the valley bottom to the bold mountain peaks. The forests of this mountain massif are amongst the most ancient in Western Europe. Home to a wealth of plant and animal species, they are living monuments. Upland forest is one of Europe's distinctive natural ecosystems. In upland forest, life is governed by the daylight cycle. In autumn, the shortening days trigger turmoil in the stag's body. He marks his territory frenziedly. His signals attract the does, prompting them to ovulate and secrete aphrodisiac scents, which the stag sniffs from afar. Does are only receptive for a few hours. Male and female deer have to synchronize their metabolisms so they are ready to mate at the same time. High on testosterone, the stag is spoiling for a fight. The forest is the scene of one of the slowest races in the world, the race for light. To survive, each plant has to shoot up above the others to climb out of their shadow and grab as much sunlight as it can. The big beech tree runs on solar power. In the autumn, it goes into energy-saving mode. From now until spring, the sun will not provide enough energy to keep the tree's leaves green and enable them to grow. So the tree lets its leaves go brown and fall off. Every year, a mature beech sheds several 100,000 leaves. The leaf litter is initially broken down into fragments by these curious creatures. Then the fragments are turned into crumbs by tiny workers called springtails. The smallest of them turn the crumbs into powder, digesting them and turning them into fertilizer. Their role in the forest is to recycle. Earthworms eat earth, swallowing their way through the soil. They enable the tree to recover the material it shed. Nature has got it all worked out. We think of earthworms as floppy, but they have powerful muscles and almost invisible hairs that enable them to propel themselves through the soil. The humble earthworm is one of the most important animals on Earth. Without earthworms, there would be no fertilizer, so no plants, and ultimately no life. Wild boar are highly partial to an earthworm or two, or 10, or 100. They devour as many as they can, and the earthworms are very good for them. They contain proteins that are vital for the boar's muscle development. Wild boar have the strength of an earthworm. The forest is a vast living factory in which each worker has a specific job and helps keep the whole going. The energy absorbed by the plants is passed on to the animals that eat them, and so, via a long chain, to every organism in the forest, including the strange beings we call fungi. Fungi are neither plants nor animals. They are often closely associated with plants and exchange food with them. Most trees depend on invisible trade-offs of this kind for their survival. This piercing call announces the arrival of a typical forest dweller, the black woodpecker. The black woodpecker is totally at home on a vertical tree trunk, levering itself with the aid of its stiff tail feathers. In the beech and firwood tree, the giant anthill is preparing for winter. The mound is home to almost 500,000 worker ants. The wood ants have been busy all summer. They have gathered a vast store of dead insects and seeds. Already sleepy with cold, they are ready for the winter. When autumn comes, it is not just leaves that fall from the trees. A vast spread of seeds is arrayed beneath the canopy like a sumptuous picnic there for the taking. Chaffinches, blackbirds, blue tits, and robins swoop down from the trees and bushes. It's a seed rush. Other treetop dwellers are attracted by the spread. Squirrels need a high-energy diet to fuel their acrobatic lifestyle. This one is burying a store of provisions for leaner times. Squirrels can be right or left-handed, but they are all expert at shelling seeds and nuts. They can tell a good hazelnut from a bad one just by handling it. If it's a good one, they eat it in 22 seconds flat. Oops, that must be the exception that proves the rule. Meanwhile, the dog fox is combing his territory for a vixen. Winter is the mating season for foxes, and he will soon be sporting a beautiful thick winter pelt. He hasn't quite got his winter finery yet, though. The buck has scented the fox. His ears pivot like radar sensors, and his wide-spaced eyes can spot danger from all sides. But foxes are not such fearsome predators as you might think. This one is satisfied with just a few voles. Hunting will soon start to get more difficult for him. As it gets colder, prey will be harder to find. Each animal prepares for winter in its own way. In the high beechwood, a miniature dragon explores the leaf litter. Salamanders are amphibians, like frogs and toads. Their body temperature changes with the temperature of their surroundings. They would die in the snow. So this one is looking for a suitable place to hibernate. It will soon be time to begin the long winter sleep. There is not much warmth in the sun now. The days are short and the winter light is faint. Late October brings the first few falls of snow. On the mountain crests, at an altitude of over 1,200 meters, minus 20 below Celsius temperatures are not uncommon. Few trees can withstand the extreme conditions at high altitudes. Broad-leaved trees and conifers have evolved different strategies to help them survive the cold. Conifers have needle-shaped leaves so that they can draw in, like someone hugging themselves to keep out the cold, reducing their exposure to drying winter winds and insulating themselves against the cold with a thick outer layer. The beech has shed its leaves and entered a dormant state. Its buds and seeds need this cold period to burgeon in spring. Winter is an integral part of the life cycle of the forest. In these parts, it lasts for over 5 months. The lynx surveys his territory. As top-level predators, lynxes have nothing to fear from anyone, but they are rarely seen. They haunt the mountains of Western Europe, all-powerful, yet elusive. It's impossible to know how many lynxes are left in this massif. Perhaps 10 or 20, or even fewer. People still hunt them, even though they are a protected species. In the few weeks since we last saw him, the fox has grown a magnificent winter coat. He is more bothered about food than the cold. Winter has made it difficult to hunt. His prey are hidden under the snow. He has to make do with berries and carrion. The giant anthill looks as if it's fast asleep inside its igloo. But the unseen colony is still alive. It has merely retreated to the underground sections of the mound. The sun is returning, lengthening the days and letting the forest know it's time to wake up. Released from the grip of the cold, the plants are coming back to life. Birds respond to the returning daylight by starting to sing. The first spring flowers are showing, encouraging insects to venture out. Spring snowflakes' drooping petals protect the flowers' pollen from rain and snow. The deer have lost their crowns. They have shed their majestic antlers. But deer do not all lose their antlers at the same time. Time of year when the older stags have no antlers is the young bucks' chance to assert their power. Some are already sporting impressive headdresses. A set of antlers can weigh 6, 8, or even 10 kilos. In a few months, all the deer will have grown new antlers. This drilling sound is one of the natural sounds of spring. It's the black woodpecker's mating call. Something else has alarmed the deer, the aggressive, all too familiar sound of a chainsaw. On the mountain crests, the trees that have survived the winter have been bent by the wind. The yellow of the daffodils dazzles in the pale light. The temperature is still cool, and the snow is not melted. But the daffodils have a trick up their sleeves, or rather, underground. Their bulbs act as a food store, enabling them to send up shoots while there is still snow on the ground and light up the mountainside with their flowers. On the forest floor, the race for light has begun again. Wood sorrel and anemones are hurrying to bloom before the tree's foliage blocks out the sunlight. The big beech tree is waking up, from its roots to the very tips of its branches. Deep inside it, the sap is rising, bubbling, invigorating the leaf buds with its thirst-quenching juices. Within days, the forest is suffused with fresh spring green. If you're a forest, a green complexion is healthy. Squirrels are the nurserymen of the forest. This one is looking for provisions he hid in the autumn. But he often forgets where he put them. The seeds and nuts left behind by squirrels germinate and grow into saplings, far away from the parent tree. No sooner have they sprouted than the saplings have to compete for a place in the sun. Not all of them will succeed. This beech sapling is growing fast in the shade of its elders. One day, it may even overtake them in the race for the light. When everyone else is getting ready to go to sleep, Badger's and Ting Mal's owl are waking up. They're the night shift. Badgers live in family groups, in sets that are often enormous and involve shifting huge quantities of earth. There are several theories as to why they have striped faces. Badgers are weak-sighted, so their distinctive facial markings may make it easier for them to see each other in the dark. Or perhaps the black stripes help mask their eyes during fights. Badgers mate all year round, but their cubs are all born in the same time of year. The relative length of the days and nights prompts the embryos in the badger's sow's womb to start developing so that they are born at the right moment. As with the other animals, the badger's private life is governed by the movements of the sun. This newborn fawn gets to its feet almost immediately. It needs to be ready to flee predators as soon as possible. The doe washes her fawn and swallows its droppings to remove all scent of its presence. Does can display great courage when defending their fawns, attacking foxes, or even wild boar with their forehooves. Animals' reproductive cycles are aligned with the seasons. They are born in the spring when food is plentiful to give them as much growing time as possible before they have to face their first winter. Births are occurring all the way up the beach. The tree is like a block of flats with different tenants on each floor. Halfway up the trunk are black woodpeckers, great spotted woodpeckers, and nuthatches. Woodpeckers eat a lot of insects. Birds keep trees healthy by eliminating their parasites. These new kids on the block are now old enough to be allowed out to play on their own at the foot of the beech tree. Playing develops the fox cub's strength and agility. Woodpeckers are architects. They make nest holes in tree trunks. When they move out, squatters move in. The nuthatch keeps unwanted visitors out by remodeling an old nest hole so that the opening is just the right size for a nuthatch, and bigger birds cannot get in. It does this by plastering mud around the opening. The birds are spring cleaning. When you're short of space, you have to clear out the rubbish frequently. Tangmal's owls have made a profession of squatting. They practically always nest in holes left by woodpeckers. Without the woodpeckers, there would be no owls. The turtle dove's courtship is rudely interrupted. By rooting up the ground with their snouts, wild boar break up the soil, making it easier for seeds to germinate. The sows live with their young. Fully grown boars only go near them in winter, the mating season. That's the theory, anyway. These boars seem to be flouting the rules. They're overexcited for this time of year. Their foaming saliva contains pheromones, the equivalent of billet doux in hog society. The foxgloves that grow in forest clearings attract pollen-gathering insects. In trying to reach the coveted nectar inside the foxglove bells, the insects get pollen all over themselves. Then it's the usual story. They move on to other flowers and fertilize them. The pollen gatherers act as go-betweens for the flowers. This mountain massif still contains some fine peat bogs. Peat bogs are climax habitats that have formed over several millennia. Many of the plants found there are survivors from the last ice age and grow nowhere else. Sphagnum mosses are unusual in that no animals eat them, with the possible exception of a few ant species. Peat bogs contain very few nutrients, so the sundews that grow there have to supplement their food intake. They lure insects with their bright colors. Then they trap them in their sticky tentacles and digest them at their leisure. This ant had a lucky escape. It will live to return to the anthill. It's the height of summer now, and the anthill is at its busiest. Wood ants amass millions of dead insects, seeds, and plant fragments. They keep the forest clean and sow seeds. The mound is an air-conditioned citadel. Its shape is dictated by the amount of light available. In the shade of the conifers, it needs to be tall to catch the light of the slanting sunbeams. But there is more to the kingdom of the ants than meets the eye. Their realm extends far underground, crisscrossed by a maze of galleries and chambers. It's a minuscule megacity. Solidarity is de rigueur in the ant kingdom. Some of the workers rarely go outside. Their sisters feed them, mouth to mouth. During this feeding, the two parties exchange their scent. This helps ensure that all the workers have the colony scent. It's a kind of chemical passport. The Queen's apparent power is in fact a form of slavery. Her Majesty's sole purpose is to lay batch after batch of eggs to ensure the continuation of her line. Her daughters clean and feed her. She has not seen daylight since she founded the colony, and never will again. If there's the slightest temperature change, the worker's sole priority is to transport the cocoons to a safe place. The cocoons represent the future of the community. Inside are the already developed nymphs who will eventually take over from their sisters. When a nymph emerges from her cocoon, she is still very pale, but she quickly acquires adult coloring. Although it looks as if the ants are constantly milling about, some workers are just pretending to be busy and shoulder none of the collective workload. In some species, almost half the individuals in a colony are shirkers. The ant megacity contains streets, food stores, a clinic, a nursery, and even a cemetery. All dead ants and ant larvae are deposited in the kingdom's necropolis. Midsummer, the big beech tree rises up like a monument to the sun god, or a rocket about to conquer the firmament. The foliage of its topmost branches represent several hundred square meters of greenery. Each leaf is a solar cell that uses photosynthesis to turn light into organic matter. Plants have the ability to convert inorganic elements into living cells. Photosynthesis was the spark that enabled life to develop on Earth. Now that it's summer, the leaves are bigger and broader. The sunbeams have to travel through several layers of leaves before they reach the ground. Only 2 to 10% of the light makes it to the forest floor. Only a few fungi, mosses, and plants grow there. Very few organisms can survive on so little light. It's pretty dark in the shade of the big trees, except when one of the patriarchs fall and allows sunbeams to pierce through the canopy. When the giant falls, spotlights suddenly illuminate the leaf litter. A bright future beckons the seeds from the shadows. Who knows what heights they may reach? The fox doesn't live on light, but he needs energy. He gets it from the field mouse, which got its energy from plants. Death for some means life for others. The field mouse provides food for the fox. Fungi and insects feed on the dead tree. Beetles carve out a niche for themselves in the diseased wood. Their larvae use their powerful jaws to chew the wood to sawdust. Bacteria in their intestines help them digest the toughest parts. Like the earthworms with the leaf litter, the larvae break up matter and turn it into fertilizer. In the forest, the life cycle is attuned to the seasons. The human presence in this mountain massif goes back a long way. Sometimes human beings behave respectfully, but all too often our actions have a destructive impact on the forest and its wildlife. Nature's workings have been shaped by thousands of years of evolution. They still function, but they can easily be thrown out of kilter. If we want the great beech to grow on worshipping the sun, the lynx to prowl its territory, and the stag to shake the forest with his guttural mating call, we have to safeguard our upland forests.